Thank you all for having me today and for being willing to sit here and let us share with you. I know sometimes when a school might get to bring a speaker in to share with their students, lots of times that speaker will be somebody who's done something very important, or maybe they have made some great accomplishments of some kind, or sometimes some schools even get to bring in a speaker who's famous, but unfortunately for you, I'm afraid I'm not any of those things. I'm just here today just to share a story with you. And even though the story that I'm about to share with you is 100% true and everything in it did happen, it's going to be about somebody who I'm sure you've never heard of, and I know society has never heard of him. But the reason I'd like to share his story with you is because he actually ended up becoming a hero to a whole lot of people, especially me. And just wanted to share his story with you because I think anytime you might have a chance, you may end up being a hero to somebody else, whether you know it or not. And so I'd just like to share his story with you if I could today. So anyway, I'd like to share with you the story today, if I could, about my little brother, whose name was Chris. And my little brother Chris, he passed away a few years ago at the age of 41. And you see, when Chris was born a long time ago, he was born very, very different. Because you see, when Chris was born, there was a little tiny piece of his brain stem that didn't develop. It just didn't show up. It just wasn't there. It was just how he was made, And so as Chris started to grow up through his life, even though his physical body started to grow, unfortunately, because of the piece of the brain stem that was missing, Chris was very, very limited, though, mentally. And probably the best way to describe Chris would be to say that for most of his life, he was a whole lot like a 6-month-old child. Chris, he couldn't walk, he couldn't talk, he couldn't change himself, he couldn't feed himself. And my mom and my dad, they actually did that for Chris, for him, for 41 years, which is another whole story in itself. But anyway, though, once Chris got to be about your age, though, it was actually late middle school, early high school, thanks to the love of mom and dad and to some incredible teachers that he had, he actually started to make some progress and some advances. And he started doing some things that they never thought that he'd be able to do. But now these things, though, they're really no big deal for you or for me, really. But they were a big deal for Chris. He actually got to the point where he could walk a little bit, holding on to some handrails. He got to where he could pedal a very small little tricycle. He got to where he could feed himself some when his teachers came up with a special thing to put on his wrist to help him. So he actually made some progress and some advances that they never thought he'd be able to make, But you see, once Chris got a little bit older than that, it was actually just after high school age or so, you see, his physical situation, it kind of started going downhill some, because he had to take these real strong medications for his condition. And those medications kind of started taking a wear and tear on his body over time. He ended up having some major stomach surgeries that they didn't think he would live through. Somehow he did. And every time he'd bounce back from one of those, he'd come home and mom would have her welcome home sign waiting for him, even though she was at the hospital the whole time with him anyway. She just wanted him to have a sign when he got back. And then, but you see, then when Chris got a little bit older than that, he started having some more kind of issues come his way. He ended up developing cerebral palsy, epilepsy, diabetes, and by the end of his life, Chris even went blind. And this picture here is actually a picture of Chris just before he was losing his eyesight, and you might notice that he's holding a little yellow teddy bear, and the reason was because for some reason, yellow was the last color he could find before he lost his eyesight, and he'd always migrate to it. And so it's kind of why we chose yellow for his shirts whenever we get to come share his story. So, but anyway, though, even though Chris had all those things going against him, though, there were two things in this world he loved more than anything else in the world. Anybody that knew Chris knew these two things about him. And that first thing that Chris loved more than anything else in the world was, maybe like some of us in here, he loved to eat. I mean, he did. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, didn't matter what we were having, didn't matter what was on the plate. He was all about it. He was all in, but I think without question, Chris's favorite time of the day was in the evening with Dad on the couch at popsicle time. That's when Dad would break off and share his popsicles with Chris. Dad and Chris went through a whole bunch of orange popsicles back in the day. That was their favorite. And maybe that, or like sometimes at Chris's birthday or a special occasion, sometimes Mom, she would take like a big towel or something and drape it around him, take his chocolate cake, set it out in front of him, and just cut him loose, And, that stuff would be everywhere, It'd be all over the place. But Chris didn't care. He loved it. He loved that kind of thing. But even though Chris loved that kind of thing, though, that wasn't what defined who he was. Because you see, it was that second thing that Chris loved to do more than anything else in the world that really defined who he was. Anybody that knew Chris knew this thing about him. And that second thing that Chris loved to do more than anything else in the world was, if you were to come over to our house, into our living room, and sit on our couch, Chris was going to find a way to crawl across the floor, climb up onto the couch, get right up next to you, and he'd want to snuggle. just snuggle up. That's just who Chris was. That's just what he did. That was just how he rolled, And I mean to tell you, it didn't matter who you were. If you sat on that couch, he was going to find you. And you were going to get snuggled on, And I mean, it didn't matter to Chris who you were, It didn't matter to Chris if you were a little old man like my Uncle Sam when he came over to visit, or if you were a brand new tiny baby like my son David or my daughter Jenny when they were born. It didn't matter to Chris if you were an expectant mother, a teenager, a parent, or if you yourself had special needs. From the time he was little until his last year with us, this is what he did pretty much every day. And when we were kids, like your age, and we would have friends come over to our house, and it didn't matter to Chris who our friends were. He had no it didn't matter to him. It didn't matter where our friends were from, what they thought, what color they were, what they looked like, what they believed, nothing. It did not matter to Chris at all. All that mattered to Chris was you were sitting on the couch, so you needed a friend. And I can remember when I was a real little kid, really little, and Chris was really little. I can remember on several occasions as a little kid, I remember sometimes I would find myself alone with Chris at home, sometimes in the room. Maybe we'd be sitting on the couch together. Maybe he might be sitting across the room on the floor or something like that. But I can remember several occasions as a kid finding myself alone with Chris in the room. And I never forget that there would be times, sometimes, when I would catch myself staring at him. Just staring. And I'll never forget the thought hit my head was, man, I love my little brother. I do. But I do remember thinking as a kid, I love my little brother, but I was really, really glad, though, that I wasn't like him. Because you see, I had two gifts that Chris didn't have, and I just love those gifts too much. The first gift that I had that he didn't have was, I had the gift of physical activity. To go outside, play ball, hang out with friends, go have fun. See, Chris, he couldn't do any of those things. And the second gift that I had that he did not have was, I had the gift of words. The ability to talk, to explain yourself, and to communicate. And see, Chris, he could never do that. So even if he was sick or hurt or maybe he was in pain, he couldn't say anything. And so Mom would just have to figure it out the best she could. And she was awesome at that. But I do remember thinking at times as a kid, finding myself alone at Chris, thinking, I love my little brother, but I'm really glad, though, I wasn't like him. However, even though I had those two gifts that Chris did not have, unfortunately, I did not always use my gifts in a very positive way. Because you see, in the neighborhood where we grew up, it was a great neighborhood. Because we had about 15 little boys, all the exact same age. Man, we came home from school, there was always something to do. Somebody to hang out with, go play ball, go have fun. But you see, we had this one little girl in our neighborhood. And her name was Karen Gilkerson. And Karen was our age. She was in our grade. She was just a little different, And I am embarrassed to tell you that me and my buddies, we picked on that little girl pretty bad. It was nothing physical. We didn't push her, punch her, hit her, or anything like that. But we were really mean. We would laugh at her. We would tease her, make fun of her, make jokes about her, call her names, not let anybody sit next to her on the bus. And I am ashamed to tell all of you that there were times when I was the one leading the charge. And when I would do that, one of my buddies, they might pat me on the back, tell me I was doing a good job. Or maybe my buddies might start in after her and I might start laughing really hard or smack them 5 or something. But man, there were 2 things I didn't know when I was doing that. Number 1, I had no clue how bad doing that must have hurt that little girl. Because you see, she didn't have any friends in the neighborhood. And this is way back before cell phones, before the internet. There's no really way for her to reach out. It's hard to imagine how many times she must have gone home really sad because of all of us. And the second thing I didn't know when I was doing that was I had no clue how bad doing that to her was going to end up hurting me. Because you see, as I grew up and I got older, it really started to bother me that I'd done that. I grew up, had my own little daughter, sent her off to school, and all I could think was, man, what if all the other little kids start ganging up on her and doing that to her? And it finally started to bother me so much that a few years ago, I decided I was going to go try to find her. Wherever she was in the world, whatever she grew up to be, I was just going to go try to find her, to apologize, to tell her I was sorry. Because I really wish I wouldn't have done it. However, I found out just before I had a chance to take my trip, and then I'm not going to get the opportunity to do that, because I found out that she passed away a few years ago. She grew up, she got very sick. She had 2 little girls of her own. And so I'm just not going to get to say those words to her, And I think part of the reason it bothered me so much for so long is because whenever I had something like this, it was heavy on my head or heavy in my heart, I would find myself sitting on the couch and sharing it with Chris. And I'll never forget the day I was sharing this one with him, and the thought hit my head was, if Karen Gilkerson had ever come over to our house, into our living room and sat on our couch, I wonder how Chris would have treated her. Well, I know that answer. He'd have crawled right up next to her and showed her kindness, that she was of value, the way everybody should be treated. And that's when I learned the first of 2 life lessons from my little brother who couldn't talk to me. And that is 100% of the time in my life to this day that I've chosen to treat someone unlike how he treated people. Like if I was hurtful, hateful, or mean. It might feel right for just a split moment in time because I was either really angry or I was getting support from negative people, but it would never feel right later. And I'd always start to struggle because of it, and it would cause problems a little bit. However, if you might allow me to, I would like to let you know that I also found from growing up with him that the exact opposite of that was also true. Because you see, I was sitting at the cafeteria table in high school, goofing off with a bunch of my buddies at lunch one day, when walking through the back door of the cafeteria came this little boy. And this little boy's name was Luther. And Luther, he was in the special needs class. You know, Luther had some challenges, you know, and stuff. And so, but the thing about Luther the most was, and you would recognize it right away if you saw Luther, he was very, very different. I mean, everything about Luther was totally different. He looked different. He talked different. He dressed different. He acted different. Everything about Luther was completely different. He was the perfect target to go after. Start laughing, teasing, making fun of him so you can get all your friends to start laughing. And when he walked through the cafeteria door that day, I heard two of my buddies start in on him. And when they did, I don't know. I don't know if it was from that experience I'd had with Karen Gilbertson, or if it was from growing up and watching how Chris was treating everybody. I don't know. I just know that when those two guys started teasing Luther that day, I remember thinking, you know what? I don't want to do that anymore. And about that time, a good buddy sitting to my left, his name was Kenny Helton. I have no idea why Kenny did this. Kenny was just a good guy. You know, I think he heard those kids teasing Luther and he felt bad for Luther. He wanted to help Luther or something. I don't know why he did it. I just know at that minute, Kenny Helton turned to me and he swung. He punched me on my shoulder. He said, "Hey, come on. Let's go talk to Luther." And when Kenny said that, initially, I froze. I guess I panicked. I didn't move. Because you see, when Kenny said we should go talk to Luther, I only had one thought rolling through my head. All I could think was, if I go talk to Luther, what is everybody else going to think about me? You know, Luther was outside of our social circle. People didn't interact with him much. If I go do that, what are they all going to start saying? And so I froze. I sat there and I didn't move. Well, Kenny, he got up, pushed his chair in, and he's gone on anyway to talk to Luther, with or without me. Because you see, the difference between Kenny Helton and me was, I cared more about what other people might say and think than I cared about doing what I knew was right. But Kenny Helton, he cared more about doing what he thought was right than he worried about what everybody else might say. So he went to go talk to Luther. And in a split second time, I had to make a fast decision. Do I get up and follow Kenny? Or stay behind with these guys and follow them? And I don't remember what went through my head. I just know that all of a sudden, I jumped up. I don't know why. Pushed my chair in, took off, and I decided to chase Kenny Helton. I followed him. I got right on his heels. We go walking up to Luther and we go to talk to him. And see, we knew his name, but we didn't know anything about him. And we knew he had limitations, but we didn't know how severe they were. So we go up to him and we're very, very careful. And before I tell you what happened, there's two things you need to know about Luther, because it'll make more sense what happened. Number one, Luther could only say a few words. Okay? He could understand you. Like if you were talking to him, he could understand you, but he could only say a few words. And the second thing about Luther was, Luther was a whole lot like an excited little kid. Have you ever been around a little kid who really gets excited and worked up when you're hanging out, or they just get all hyper? That was Luther. He used to do that. He'd get real excited and fired up and happy, smiling, laughing, shaking, wiggling. I mean, he really got juiced up. But when he would start shaking and get excited, everything would start shaking. But the thing that shook the most was his head. It'd go back and forth really fast like that while he's smiling and laughing, you know. But the problem was, if you asked Luther a question, and his answer to the question was yes, lots of times his head would still be shaking no while he was saying yes at the same time, you know, it was really it was funny because it would catch us off guard. And I think he knew he did it because he would laugh too, but I don't know. Well, we didn't know he did it. We went up to him, we had no clue. We're just very careful. We're like, hey, Luther, how you doing, buddy? You have a good day today? Yeah. You know, we're like, well, Luther, were you a good boy in class today? Yeah. We're like, well, then we asked him a third question. Let's see, when we asked him this third question, man, he quit joking around. He quit smiling, he quit laughing, and he got real serious real quick. And I think it's because this third question that we asked him, it didn't have a yes or no answer. So he was trying to figure out how to say it. And he was concentrating so hard trying to figure out how to say it. And the third question that we asked him was, we're like, Luther, what did you do in your class today, buddy? And the minute we asked him that, man, you could see it on his face. Just, whoosh, he got serious, focused, locked in. I mean, he was concentrating hard. He even started shaking again. And finally, all he could come out to tell us was, ear. Of course, we didn't know what that meant. But his teacher was right there with him. And she told us that on that particular day, Luther had been very good in class. And whenever Luther was good in class, right towards the end of the period, he was allowed to put the headphones on and listen to music. So that's what he's trying to tell us. It was just the only way he knew how to do it. You know, ear. So when the teacher told us that, we're like, oh, Luther, buddy, you got to put the headphones on and hear the music? Do you like the headphones? Do you like the music? Yeah. You know, he got really excited, you know, because he loved it, you know, and it was just real positive and upbeat. So anyway, the next day at lunch rolls around, we decided we're going to go try to find him again. But I need to be honest with you. We didn't know if he'd remember who we were. You know, we didn't know what his capabilities were, if he would know or not. But it didn't matter. We were going to try to find him anyway. So the next day lunch rolled around. We came through the cafeteria door on one side of the cafeteria. Luther, he came in through the other side like he did every day. Got in line with his teacher for lunch and was waiting in the lunch line. We started walking across the cafeteria floor. We got about halfway across the room, and when we did, his eyes came up and he saw us. And when he saw us, he must have remembered, I guess, because when he saw us, he just took off. Just bolted, left his teacher, left his spot in line. He didn't care. He was gone. He was coming across the cafeteria floor at us, and he was coming pretty quick. And he's moving, and as he came across the floor, he was coming faster and faster and faster. You know, we were like, oh, you know, what is he doing? You know, and he sprinted up to us. We were like, and he stopped, and then he jumped up and he grabbed us, started giving us a big bear hug. You know, and then he reached up. He started rubbing my hair, you know, back when I had hair. And he started telling us about the ear, and the yeah. And it was just real positive and upbeat and fun, you know. It was just, I probably don't need to tell you that after that day, pretty much every single day at lunch, we were trying to find Luther. Because he was just so positive and happy. He just made your day better. And I don't know if any of you kids in here are lucky enough to have someone in your life who, whenever you're around them and then you leave from them, you always leave happier, never sadder. That's Luther. That's the type of guy he was. He just made your day better. So every day the rest of that year, our senior year in high school, we were trying to find Luther because he just made the day better. And throughout the course of that year, Luther tried to tell us a bunch of stories. But you see, it was the story about the music that was our favorite. Because you see, That's when one day at lunch, we accidentally found out there was one singer in this world Luther loved more than all the others in the world. And so now we lived way out in the country, and this was a very long time ago. So I doubt any of you kids have ever heard of this singer's name. But I bet some of your teachers have. Luther loved a singer whose name was Kenny Rogers. Oh, just loved him. And Kenny Rogers used to sing a bunch of songs back in the day. But there's this one song he sang, it was called Lady. Now that was Luther's favorite. And the way we found out was by accident one day at lunch. The conversation started normal. It just took a turn in a direction we had no idea it was going there. We have no idea why. It just happened. We don't know why. We're like, hey Luther, how you doing, buddy? You have a good day today? Yeah. Luther, were you a good boy in your class today? Yeah. Luther, what'd you do in class today, buddy? And for whatever reason on that particular day, he got so worked up and excited, he starts going, Rogers, ear, Rogers, ear. He put one hand on his belly, one on his back, looked straight up to the sky, and he just started singing the song Lady as loud as he could right in the middle of the high school cafeteria. Right? And I have to admit, Luther, he didn't sing very well. And the only word to the whole song he knew was lady. So he just sang that word over and over and over. But he would change the pitch in his voice to make it sound like a song. You know, so he'd be like, lady. We're like, what is he doing? You know, and then one of our buddies figured it out. And they called him on it. They're like, Luther, are you trying to be Kenny Rogers? Are you trying to be Kenny Rogers and sing that song Lady by Kenny Rogers? Is that what you're doing? Yeah! And it's just real positive and fun and upbeat, you know. It got to the point where some days at lunch, we would go through the cafeteria line and we'd help him get his tray. And he'd come back and he'd sit at the table with all the guys for lunch. And his teacher, she was okay with that. She let us do that because she knew we were taking care of him. She knew we had his back. She stayed real close, but she let us do that. And I'll be honest with you, while Luther was sitting there eating lunch with us, sometimes he might get a little messy, and we may have to help clean him up a little bit. Or maybe he might get real excited talking about the music and Kenny Rogers. He'd just jump up out of his seat, knock his tray, food would go flying everywhere. And we'd have to calm him down and clean it all up. Well, anyway, I go home from school one day, and my mom, who had heard us telling all these stories about this kid named Luther, says, hey, look, I was out grocery shopping today. Saw this on the side rack for like $5. I don't know, maybe you want to give it to Luther. I was like, what is it, Mom? She pulls it out of the bag, and it was a black t-shirt with a great big picture of Kenny Rogers on it. I was like, Mom, no way. Are you kidding me? He'll go nuts. I mean, he'll go crazy. That's like his favorite person in the world. He wants to be Kenny Rogers, you know. If he puts that shirt on, he might flat out think that he is Kenny Rogers, you know. But and then a thought hit my head. It was just a serious thought, and I thought, oh, wait a second. You know what? I don't know if Luther were to look at the picture on that shirt. I don't know if he is going to know that that is Kenny Rogers. I know he knows the music when he hears it. I don't know if he's going to know the face when he sees it. But he might. Hey, thanks, Mom. Grab the shirt. Head to school the next day. It was early morning bus duty, and I was running around looking for Kenny Helton. And my buddies I hang out with at lunch. I was like, guys, man, you're not going to believe what Mom found for Luther. They're like, what is it? You know, I pulled the shirt out. They're like, oh no, he's going to lose it, you know. He's going to go, and then one of them went, oh, he's not going to start singing again, you know. And they started debating it, and then they did the exact same thing. They went, whoa, wait. Do you think Luther is even going to know who that is when he sees it? And none of us knew for sure, but we couldn't wait to find out. So when lunch rolled around, we got there a little early. I think we were excited. We couldn't wait to see what he was going to do when he saw the shirt. Would he know it? Would he not? I don't know. So we go over to our table, and when we come into the cafeteria, we look around. Luther's not there yet. So we go on over to our table and start settling in. But by this time, it wasn't just our table of guys that was excited. It was like 2, 3, 4 tables all in that part of the cafeteria. Everybody knew what was going on. Everybody was excited. We're all fired up, looking for him to come in, high-five, and couldn't wait to see what he was going to do. And I think that's when it hit me. When you help lead people to be mean to someone, they'll follow you. But if you help lead people to be kind to someone, lots of times they'll also follow you. I think it's a matter of how each one of us chooses to lead and who it is we all choose to follow. But anyway, so we had the shirt, and it wasn't wrapped up or in a box or a package or a present or anything. We just had it. And so I asked my buddies, I was like, guys, man, how do we give this thing to him? They said, I don't know. Just hand it to him. I said, okay. But I did hide it behind my back. Luther came through the cafeteria door. Hey, Luther, how you doing, buddy? You have a good day today? Yeah. Luther, were you a good boy in class today? Yeah. Luther, we have a present for you today, buddy. Yeah. We pulled the shirt out. Luther looked. Luther goes nuts. Rogers, here, lady. And he just started jumping around all over the cafeteria. We're like, oh, calm down, And well, it just so happened, of all days, of the entire school day of the year, on that one particular day, Luther just happened to be wearing his bibbed overalls. You know what those are, right? Straps come up over the shoulders, the shirt's underneath the bibs. Well, and to get to the shirt, you would have to undo the straps, but if you do, well, anyway, Luther's wearing his bibs that day, and he decides he needs that shirt on now. And he knew how to do it. And so he did it. Right in the middle of the cafeteria, reached up, unclipped both straps, there they go. They start dropping right there in the middle of the cafeteria. Luther's now in the process of doing his best, trying to get just underwear naked right in the middle of the high school cafeteria now. We're like, oh, no, Luther, no, buddy, stop. Just stop. You've got to keep your clothes on, Well, the teacher, she panicked. She saw what was happening. She runs over there real quick. She starts scooping him up real quick. Fortunately, she got to him before they got too far. She's trying to pull him out of the cafeteria and get him to the bathroom to change him out there. But you could hear her while she was taking him across the cafeteria floor. She was like, oh my, Luther, we're in school. We keep our pants on. They got out the door. You could hear the cafeteria door shut. Boom. But you could still hear him when he's heading way down the hallway. Rogers! We're like, oh gosh. He might explode. And we went up to his teacher later. We went up to her. We're like, what did you do with him? She said, I tried to calm him down, control him, and get him to the bathroom in time, but he was not having it. He was trying to get naked right out there in the hallway. So she just did all she could think to do. She took those bibbed overall straps, pulled them back up over his shoulders, jerked that t-shirt on over his head, and stuck his arms through. That calmed him down a bit. And that's when we saw him next. Because he comes cruising back into the high school cafeteria. He has his black Kenny Rogers t-shirt on top of his bibbed overalls. Way too big for him, hanging almost down to his ankles. He came walking in. He was so proud of that shirt. And when he came walking back in, well, we all started screaming and cheering and yelling his name. We're like, Luther! He heard everybody cheering for him. And he looked up and he started dancing, rubbing his shirt, and then he turned just like my buddy was afraid he might, looked up at the sky, and he just started singing the song Lady, louder than he had ever sung it before. Except this time, we all joined in with him. And we all started singing with him, or screaming, or whatever that was, because we were all terrible. But I probably don't need to tell you that even though that happened a very long time ago in my life, to this day, it's still one of the most powerful, positive, happy memories I've ever had. It's all because of one kid
named Kenny Helton, who led the way one day and showed the rest of us how to go treat someone else the same way Chris treated people, with kindness and compassion, no matter who they are. And that's when I learned the second of the 2 life lessons from my little brother who couldn't talk to me. The problem is I don't know if you're going to understand this, because I didn't understand it till I got to be old. But that second life lesson I learned from my little brother Chris was 100% of the time in my life to this day that I have chosen to treat someone else the way he treated people, like to be kind and compassionate no matter who they are. It seems what happens is, not only does it feel right at the moment it's taking place, but I think what you're going to find is it's going to feel right later in your life, even when you get older, because you can make positive, happy memories in your head. And I think more positive, happy memories you can make for yourself over time, the more positive, more happy person you'll become. So anyways, thank you for letting me share all that. Y'all have been a great audience. If you wouldn't mind though, there's one more thing I'd like to share with you about Chris, if I could. Because you see, in 41 years, Chris never uttered one single negative word about another human being. He never hurt anybody with any of his actions or his deeds. And he never asked for one single thing for himself, while all the while treating everyone he came across with kindness, love, and compassion, no matter who they were. Chris lived his life like this for 14,971 straight days. And on the night he passed away, all I could think was, I don't know if I'm strong enough to do it. For one. On the night Chris passed, he passed away in the living room on his favorite spot on the couch. Mom and Dad were right there with him. I got to get there a few minutes later, got to have a couple minutes with Chris before he had to go. And during that few minutes I had with him, I found myself staring at him again. Just staring like I did when I was little. But you see, everything had changed. Because when I was a little boy and I stared at Chris, all I could think was, I wouldn't want to be like him. But when it was time for him to go that night, all I could think was, he's exactly who I'd like to be like. I'd love to leave this world one day knowing that I treated people the way that he treated people. And so, 5 days after that happened, 5 days after Chris passed, it happened to be Mom's birthday. Of course, we were a little worried about Mom because Mom and Chris were so tight. Mom took care of Chris every day of his life for 41 years, so they were really close. And so we were worried about her after Chris passed. Now, she did awesome because she's such a strong person. But anyway, we wanted to get her something special for her birthday that year. We didn't know what to do. So we called a buddy of ours that knew something about computers, because I don't know anything about computers. And he helped build and put together for us that year for Mom's birthday a very small, tiny, one-page website on the internet, just in honor of Chris, something that Mom could have. Had a couple little pictures of him, little paragraph who he was, but apparently, if you have a website built, you have to give the website a name. So we chose to give Chris's website the name Silent-Strength. We felt like maybe that kind of described him a little bit. He couldn't talk, but he sure was strong in how he chose to treat everyone, no matter what he was going through. And then, in the middle of the website's page, we put one big, huge, fat, bold sentence. It was a pledge, really. Something that me and my other little brother, Mike, we wanted to see if we could do this. Could we pull this off maybe for one day out of our busy lives now that Chris was gone, kind of in his honor? And that one sentence in the middle of the page we wanted to try to do for a day if we could said, today, my positive actions will speak louder than all of my words. Because that was how Chris lived every day. So we just wanted to try it. And crazy things started happening. And it seemed like every day we tried to do that, it just seemed to be the better the day was for some reason. Anyway, that would be the end of the story. But there's just one tiny piece of the puzzle left, and that is, you see, about 5 weeks after Chris passed, out of the blue one day, I got a phone call. I answered it, and it was a teacher in a place called Bristol, Tennessee. I have no clue how he did it, but somehow he had accidentally stumbled upon that little one-page website of Chris's on the internet. And he called me up, and he told me that he had some 5th graders in his PE class not being very nice to each other. He asked if I'd come down and share Chris's story as kind of a kindness presentation for his kids. Maybe it might help in some way. And when he asked me that, I said, Mr. Arrington, I really appreciate that, but I'm sorry. I don't think I could do that. Because I was just afraid I'd just get too sad, too emotional talking about Chris. So I told him thanks, but no thanks. And I got ready to hang up the phone. And right before I did, he told me that he totally understood, but that if I ever changed my mind one day, to please give him a call, because he said, I never know, maybe I could be a voice for my little brother that didn't have one. Maybe there might be a kid somewhere that could get something positive from Chris. So I ended up calling him back. I said, Mr. Arrington, I'll be glad to try. I've never done anything like that, but I'll try. He said, great. Invited me down. Dad goes with me. Dad drives the car for support, right? So we go down to the school. We get down to the school. We go walking into the building, and right when we get there, it was the little tiny kids. The like kindergarten, first, second, the real little ones. I am not comfortable with the real little ones. I'm more comfortable with your age and the high school kids. We got in there and we started looking. I went to the bathroom. I was so nervous, I thought I was going to get sick. We come out. The kids came into the gym, sat down. We started doing the program, and they were really nice. And as we were sitting there doing the program, unbeknownst to me, off to the side, Dad snapped a picture. And as you can tell, those kids are tiny. So little, but they're really nice. And because they were, by the time we got to the end of the program, I didn't get sad and emotional and upset. I was real happy about that. But when we got to the end of that program that day, I honest to goodness had no clue if those little kids had understood a single thing I had just said. They're so little. But it didn't matter. It was over with. And I told myself in my head, I said, I'm never doing that again the rest of my life. About that time, the kids got up on the floor, started heading back to class. The doorway was right here. I went over to the side to pack my stuff. My stuff was over in the corner right over there. As I was doing that, a little boy who was sitting right about here, he's just out of the picture, you can't see him, got up and started making his way over to me. Brown hair, glasses, his name was Matthew. I know that because when he approached me, he stuck his hand out and he introduced himself. He said, Mister? I said, yes, sir, buddy. He said, do you remember that little girl you used to laugh at and tease and make fun of? And you didn't get a chance to apologize to her. And when he said it, my head hung because I knew he was about to let me have it. And I deserved it. I said, yes, sir, little buddy, I remember. He said, well, I believe that wherever she is right now. And then he reached up and he whispered into my ear. And nobody else could hear it. And he said, I think she just heard you. And I think she and Chris are smiling today. And I hope you'll never stop sharing his story. So we get in the car to go home. And I'm trying to process that, what this kid just said. We go home. When we get home, we walk into the door. We walk into the door. Mom's standing there waiting for us at the house. See, Mom, she didn't go to the program that day because it was a little too soon for her, but she really wanted to hear how it went. She's standing there waiting. When we walked in the door, she's smiling. Big old grin, ear to ear. We hadn't seen her do that since before Chris had passed. We're like, what's gotten into you? She said, go look at the computer. We go over to the computer and look down at it. And a bunch of those kids from that program had written messages. None of them left their name. And one message in particular said, "I'd like to thank Chris's mom and dad for taking care of him for all those years, because without them, he may not have had a story. And I'm going to take that Silent-Strength pledge for one day in his honor." And that's the day. One positive sentence from a 9-year-old kid who I didn't even know, and one positive sentence on a computer from someone who didn't leave their name, changed everything. I think sometimes we forget just how powerful our positive words are to other people, and when you might change somebody's life forever. So after that day, we started going anywhere anybody would have us to go share Chris's story at schools and stuff like that, and with kids that would let us share like you've let us do today. And last year, we even got invited down to a high school in Tennessee. And I had no clue until after that high school program was over that a bunch of those kids at that high school last year were the exact same kids you just saw in the other picture. They'd just all grown up. Those kids changed me and my family's life simply because a couple of them went out of their way one day to say something kind and write something kind. The exact same power that every single one of us has every single day if we choose to use it. So before I go, if I could, I'd like to say something to a particular type of kid in here. I'd like to say thank you to the type of kid sitting in here who's kind of like Matthew, kind of like Kenny Helton. You see, you're the type of kid who will go out of your way to say something or do something kind for the others. You're the type of kid, whether you know it or not, you're a light in a whole lot of people's darkness. You're the type of kid who I used to watch will go right up to my little brother Chris and say hi to him. Maybe pat him on the shoulder, ask him how he's doing, even if he couldn't respond. You see, you made him, and you make other people around you feel important and happy, when a lot of people in this world, they just don't do it that way. And whether you know this or not, one day, somebody sitting in this room is going to be sitting around telling everyone else what it is you did and what it is you said that changed their life forever. And that's when the true hero in that person's life is going to end up becoming you. So on behalf of every single one of those kids, on behalf of everyone that you've ever said something positive or kind to, and on behalf of my little brother Chris and kids like him who couldn't say these words to you himself, so I'd like to say it for him. God bless you, kids, for your positive words and positive actions to other people, and thank you from the bottom of all their hearts. Okay? All right. Thank you for having me. I hope you guys have a good year. Okay? Thank you, guys.
What if there was a positive social media platform for schools where kids could go to post positive, uplifting messages about anyone else in their school? What if, when a student went to post one of these positive messages, nobody ever knew who it was coming from? And what if you could 100% guarantee that every single message that ever became visible was in fact positive? And finally, what if this platform put all of these positive messages into a rotating display so that the school could put them wherever they want to for everyone to see? Facility monitors, school website, social media. When we first created this concept, people told us it wouldn't work. They said kids wouldn't participate. Well, the students at these schools this past year, they disagree. UUplift.com is the first ever 100% positive social media for kids in schools. That's uncharted territory that we hope you might want to explore.
Why does peer pressure always have to be negative?
Right.
Whenever we're talking about peer pressure, it's always negative, negative, negative. Why? Why can't you have positive peer pressure?
For a kid, especially a young kid, a middle school kid, to step out of their own personal world where the whole world is things reacting to them and they can put themselves and be empathetic and can send some of that love to somebody else. I mean, it changes their entire perspective on life.
It won't let you say rude things. It'll just say only positive things. Like, you could say something bad, it'll be like positive only.
This is what it's for. It's not for drama. It's not for the rumors and negativity. It's to encourage your classmates.
Right.
They know its purpose, and that's what's different about it.
Just a positive culture and a positive environment in my classroom, because they're looking, you know, for people to add to the wall.
Having that platform that's so accessible to them, and when it's read over the announcements every single day, it's a testimonial that there's so much good in the world and that these kids have it in their hearts, and it's like the best infection, because it literally, one kid at a time gets infected with happiness and with joy, and then that kid goes on the wall and writes something, and then that other kid who gets, you know, it's completely changed the way that these kids see the other kids on campus. They're not just other students, it's part of their family. And it's, for me as a teacher, it's an empowering way to start the day, as a brief reminder that I'm not here by myself, that I'm just surrounded by this community of very loving people. And I mean, that's how you should start your day. It's part of the biggest culture change that we've ever had. This is my 6th year here, and we've never had a culture where kids love kids. It's just never been like that. And that's exciting.